Hello and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, one and all.
This is the Two Mats regular Q&A episode brought to you by the wonderful subscribers of the New European newspaper.
Great folk.
First question straight in from Richard Barman. I always thought Peter Mandelson was an oily self-server, but his disgusting and embarrassingly grovelling statement about Trump yesterday was beyond belief. What's your opinion?
Yes, I'm slightly puzzled by the but. However, look, I mean, this was Peter Mandelson, just for those who haven't enjoyed it, and I recommend you go straight onto YouTube after this and enjoy it. Peter Mandelson in 2019 was extremely rude about Donald Trump, but he called him a bully and reckless and a danger to the world. But he took to Fox News, obviously, it was a bit like Winston Smith in the final scene of 1984 in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, saying that he loves Big Brother after love, and sort of apologise. Well, he did apologise for being so rude about the president. But what was much more funny was that, and poor show, I have to say, was that he blamed it on an Italian journalist who we identified in Rats in a Sack, the fine column, and Antonella Guerrero of La Repubblica. And I love this idea that, he was sort of the victim of a drive-by journalist.
He said she made me say it.
It's sort of as if Mandelson ever gave a quote that he hadn't lovingly handcrafted before.
Peter Mandelson, must declare an interest. Peter Mandelson has written for us a couple of times.
Yes, and
has been very supportive. Maybe he is an oily self-server, but you'd have to look far and wide in politics.
Part two of this was that Paris is worth the mass. I mean, I think that being a diplomat to the court of Donald Trump is actually very difficult.
Yes.
And although he, I'm sure that having the best residence in Washington won't have been, unadjacent to his considerations, he Mandelson does like a challenge, and he will be good at this because he is now a serious political veteran. He's done the EU, he's done British government. He knows Starmer very well. He knows Jonathan Powell, the National Security Advisor. There's going to be some very tricky negotiations ahead, not least to do with trade. And yes, all of the above, Richard, I totally understand why you say what you're saying. But in terms of, there has to be a little bit of realpolitik here. We've got a maniac in the White House. And I think that having Peter out there will, on balance, be a very good thing for the country.
I definitely agree with that. And I don't think being an oily self-server, if that's the case in some people's eyes, is mutually exclusive to being a very clever politician. And I don't think there's any doubt that Mandelson is a very clever, astute politician.
Yeah, I mean, Mandelson has long been a lightning conductor for hatred within the left of centre movement and more broadly.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was homophobic. I don't know if it still is, but he can be a bit sort of sinuous and a bit misleading.
He was treated really badly by Tony Blair.
And he
accepted that with great grace at the time.
Yeah, I mean,
to be fair to him.
He is, aside from all of the sort of character issues that Richard talks about, he's also one of the most impressive sort of electoral strategists of the last 40 years. I don't know whether he would, Labour would have won as big as it did in 97 without Peter, but he certainly had a big role to play. And let's not forget, it was Neil Kinnock that brought Peter in, not Blair. I mean, he's so identified with Blair.
That's right.
But actually, it was Neil that saw that Peter had something. Not least that he was the grandson of Herbert Morrison, I suppose.
That's right.
But he is more Labour than people think.
He's also the subject of the greatest New Labour anecdote of them all, which is I think it was the Blackpool Party conference where he walked into a chip shop with all the photographers behind him. And ordered fish and chips and then pointed to the mushy peas and said, and a side of the guacamole, please.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's...
I don't know whether that's true.
Well, anyway. Years ago in an interview, I asked him, and he vigorously contested it in the way that someone who is not necessarily... might be being a bit economical with the truth.
With mushy peas all over his fingers.
Mushy peas all over his fingers.
Richard, thank you for your question. Next question, please.
I've heard the progressive call to arms, not least during the excellent interview with Peter Hyman. Thank you. This is from Chris in Stroud. Thanks, Chris. But where's the rallying point? I want to help, but where do I go? Who do I get behind? How do I contribute? Matt?
Great question. And by the way, thank you, dearest listeners, for all of the feedback we had on the Peter Hyman episode. We had a massive mailbag of people saying thank you. It was great. And I think, and I hope you agree, dear listeners, but it was the fact that we had quite a long time to get into the topic, which was good. You know, we didn't rush through it in 40 minutes.
Yes.
So I'm going to try and do that a bit more on our Monday sessions.
I think it's a good plan.
Yeah. How do you help? Well, I can tell you, Chris, perhaps you already are, but you can certainly subscribe to the New European, mate. You know, that is a rallying point. I think
it is. I mean, actually, all joking apart, that is exactly the sort of thing to do, which is, you know, you find something, a cause, a newspaper, and obviously if it's a newspaper, it's the New European, goes without saying, that an issue that matters to you and you feel passionate about, and that might be a party, but it might not. And you know, I love that Benjamin Franklin quote. You know, he's after the drafting of the Constitution is asked, you know, what manner of government have you bequeathed us, Dr. Franklin? And then he says, and everyone knows this line, but it's still good, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. And I think that what we've got to get out of, and Chris, to be fair to him, is asking how, is stop being consumers and digital, obsessives, and become citizens again. And I think, you know, buying newspapers, getting involved in causes, doing something in your neighbourhood.
Wear a badge. Listen, I'll tell you.
Go on a protest march.
Chris, one of the, when I had the idea for the New European, it was quite specifically tied to a personal experience when the Independent launched, right? And I was 15 or 16. And the Independent had what is still to this day the greatest marketing slogan of any newspaper. It said, "The Independent, it is a you."
It's terrific.
And I, of course, bought into the marketing spiel and thought,
me too. I'm
going to demonstrate how independent I am by doing exactly what they've told me to do.
And it was a very good newspaper.
And I used to buy the Independent. It was a big old broadsheet in those days, and very ostentatiously and quite pompously read it on the tube, on the Merseyrail train into
Glover,
school.
Before his Daily Mail.
Yeah, amazing. Miles Kingston column.
It had incredible people.
But I did think that when the referendum happened, I thought, how are the 48%, as they were then known, going to visibly demonstrate their protest? You know, because when you think about it, there are actually very few visible ways of showing what you're on. And one of the ways you can do it is you can paint a placard, you can wear a pin badge, or you can buy a newspaper and read it on the bus.
Yes.
And I think that has a genuine, valuable signal to everybody else sitting in that carriage. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm reading the New European. I'm reading The Guardian. I'm reading whatever, the Daily Mirror, whatever you think represents your values, pick one up and read it in public.
Totally. Because what they want, and this is where social media has gone so badly wrong, is after its sort of initial promise as a collaborative force, is they want to keep you separate. They want to keep you fragmented. They want to keep you locked into your phone. Now, we all use our phones. We're all extremely online. There's no point in denying it. But the way back is to collaborate in person. And that can take the form of being a subscriber. It can take the form of going on a march. It can take the form of joining a party or a cause or something. Yeah. But democracy doesn't come for free.
That's right. And I think it was Jean Baudrillard, having just chastised Michael Gove for misattributing two quotes on Radio 4 completely. I need to be careful. I think it was the French philosopher Baudrillard who was describing
simulacra et simulacrum.
But he was describing the purpose of a newspaper and was saying that a newspaper is it's a community, because you sit there reading it in the knowledge that as you're reading it, tens of thousands of other people are also reading the same thing in that day, and it's like there's an abstract network that a newspaper represents. It's a literal community. So, go buy a fucking newspaper.
What physicists call a state of entanglement.
There we go.
I love that.
Entangle yourselves in the New European. Next question, please. From M33TTA, maybe that should be meter. I don't know how you say it. It's rather good,
isn't it?
Have you considered an alternative angle to your Southport discussion? Violence against women and girls. Or are we falling into a trap of assuming it was motivated by religion because he wasn't white? Is it possible that the handbook was used as a means to an end rather than part of the motive? Asking in good faith, genuinely interested to get your views. Well, thank you, Mita.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point. And I think just to clarify, neither of us, I mean, certainly not Matt, but not me either, was saying that he was, definitely motivated by religion. I've no idea, much less that his ethnicity was or is an issue. I think that it's I start from the position I'm very open-minded about the public inquiry, and I think this point is extremely on the money because I was sorry to read that Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has rejected Home Office suggestion to extend extremism to embrace misogyny. Because one of the big changes, I think, in the last 10 years is that there's always been misogyny and it's always been horrible, but that it has become an identifiable online subculture.
Yes.
People talk about the manosphere.
You've only got to look at Andrew Tate.
Well, that's right. And it is, we were talking the other day about how culture generally is taking a sort of sharply masculine turn, and some of it's absurd, like Mark Zuckerberg's big neck and ridiculous hair, but some of it isn't absurd. It's really toxic, and it leads to and encourages violence against women and girls. After Trump's victory, one of the most horrific sort of memes that went round online was "Your body, my choice," as a sort of attack on women's reproductive rights. And I thought, this is going to get worse. And I think that's a very interesting suggestion, and I hope that the inquiry does look into that. We don't know, but even if it doesn't come up, it doesn't find that specifically was the motive. I think there's merit in making it part of the inquiry to encourage good practice.
100% agree. And Misa, you weren't alone in asking. We had 3 or 4 specifically. We had a great response again to our discussion, because we didn't agree about all of it, but we did. We had a very good, candid discussion about this tragic incident. But we had 3 or 4 people specifically write in and say, look, this was about misogyny in their view.
Yeah, and I
guys should flag that up.
I think it's a really good and intelligent point, and I do think that this is. I mean, sadly, I think this strain of extremism is going to get worse in the years ahead, because it has in Trump and in MAGA a sort of overarching protective embrace, and I think it needs to be monitored very carefully because it has real life.
Well, totally. I mean, your point about Yvette Cooper refusing to go down that path.
I'm baffled by that.
My question to her is, how do you then deal effectively with an odious, vile toe rag like Andrew Tate, who is demonstrably damaging the lives of women everywhere, the way he carries on?
Has justified rape, and I mean...
do we just say, free speech? No, fuck that. Come on.
I mean, he has said things online which are, in my view, already in breach of the law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he certainly represents a culture, and the real danger is that this is proving adhesive amongst the young.
Yeah.
And I think therefore I hope she reverses that decision, because it is a form of extremism now. It is, and it's. I think the implication of Mita's question is that it's a discrete ideology which has nothing to do with Islamism, and it's nothing necessarily to do with the hard right, even, although there's a big overlap there. I think it is now its own problem.
Fascinating topic. Mita, thank you for your question, and of course it was in good faith. All of our questions were in good faith. We love it. We're going to take a very short break, and we'll come back in 2 ticks. Welcome back, dear listeners, to the regular Sunday Q&A from the New European newspaper.
This is from Beatrice.
Beatrice writes,
first up, can I say how much I enjoy your pods? I really look forward to them. I also enjoy reading the paper. Thanks, Beatrice. Is it true that the cost of Brexit thus far is higher than everything the UK paid into the EU since 1973? My husband came across it on Instagram, reporting to be coming from a setup called Rejoin the EU. Matt, any?
Yes, well, I've been doing some digging.
The two maths.
I've had my calculator. You would actually think this would be one of those kind of stats that was easy to find. It's not at all easy to find. And I think part of the...
I got halfway there, but not fully.
Part of the reason is it's really hard to compare apples with apples in this instance. However, there are a couple of things we can point to. There are a couple of facts we can point to. One of which is, since 1973 to our exit from the EU, Britain paid into net, so this is our gross payments minus the rebate, minus the net contributions for projects we got back from the EU. We paid in a net £225 billion over those 47 years, which equates to around about an average, a mean sum of around £4.5 billion. Now, in the last 10 years before we left, that sum was actually up to about 10 billion, 10 or 11 billion. In the early years, it was very low. There was one year, 1976, I think, we got 400 million back off them. I'm positive. I don't know what I'll have to do to do the digging on that. So anyway, total outlay of 225 billion.
Right.
So there is a report from Bloomberg in 2023 on the third anniversary. We're now at the fifth anniversary, but the third anniversary of our leaving the European Union, which says that the net cost to the British economy has been £100 billion a year. Already.
In 3 years.
Year. So within the 3 years in 2023, we had lost, if you take those two as comparators, we had lost in like for like kind of economic benefit more than we paid to be part of the club.
Well, I mean, your first figure was for 47 years.
Yeah.
And that was for what, 3?
That was for 3. So in 3 years, that was per year. In 3 years, it had been a cost of, according to Bloomberg, who are respectable.
Oh yeah, they're very good.
To do their
this is what they're good at. Yeah,
they add stuff up professionally. It was costing £100 billion per year.
So already, it's more.
It's well more. Already,
more.
It's cost us double in lost economic benefit. Now, of course, people will say, but those comparisons are ridiculous and they're not the same.
Are they? I don't know.
But I don't think they are. And I think it's actually a matter of objective fact now. And you can argue, oh yes, but we haven't seen the true Brexit potential. We haven't. You remember Jacob Rees-Mogg saying it would take 50 years before we found out whether it was worth it or not. Very convenient to say it
another actuarial thing for me.
In my lifetime.
When I live too.
But there's no question that the British economy has suffered significant damage since we left the European Union.
Completely.
And the 10 billion we were paying a year, sometimes 12, sometimes 9, in the last 10 years or so, was very good value for money.
It was, and with every passing day, it's clear that at the moment, the big battle is America versus China economically, in all sorts of ways, not least AI. And I think that there's a great mutual interest in the UK and the EU getting back together again.
Yeah.
Because, in fact, and you hear this a lot from people on the continent, we were a difficult member. We were often causing perfidious Albion and all that. But I think also we were a brake on some of the more sclerotic aspects of the EU. And basically we need, this part of the world needs to be a bloc again.
Yeah.
And quickly.
Yeah. I saw Times radio star Andrew Neil, the man with more X's in his Twitter biography than anyone I've ever seen. He's got more X's in his Twitter biography than most football managers. It's incredible. But anyway, he was saying, but you can't, you can't say the European Union is our biggest trading partner because it's a load of countries, and actually the United States is our biggest trading partner, single country.
Yeah,
but that's bollocks. We're talking about markets. The European Union.
Single market was our biggest trading partner.
There's a clue in the name, folks.
Yes,
it's a single market, and it's by far 45%, I think.
Which is why, never let it be forgot, Thatch signed up to more qualified majority voting because she correctly saw that the single market was what probably in those days was still called spondylix.
Yes, exactly. Ka-ching,
Ka-ching, ka-ching.
Beatrice, thank you for your question. I hope we've given it some data-driven answer. Ollie Mansell, your question next. As a new European subscriber, well done, sir, and somebody who's found solace in both the paper and the podcast in increasingly disturbing times, if you're not going to name the Southport attacker, could you consider also not clipping directly from a typically crass and clueless Trump speech? However ridiculous it might sound, some of us are going to need the coping mechanism over the next 4 years of at least not having to hear his voice. Well, good luck with that, mate.
Yes, I mean, Ollie, I have a measure of sympathy because obviously it's not great hearing that particular voice back. And it's also a bit of a shock to watch him being in the White House again and in the Oval Office, because we've been used to him sounding off in hotel atriums and rallies. But you now see him at the White House and think, oh, shit, this is real. But I think you're slightly comparing, you're not comparing light with light, because the decision not to name the Southport attacker, which, you know, you can argue the toss about, is one incident and a horrific one. But I think it's going to be a hard ask for this podcast, and indeed any news podcast, not to include clips of Donald Trump in the next 4 years. Partly because that's, you know, we dealt with this last week in the Q&A about Mr. Fridge, as that's not anyone who didn't hear it, and I hope you all did. That's Nigel Farage's supervillain alter ego, Mr. Fridge. They're not going away. I mean, we have to report on them and hold them to account, and it's very difficult for us to then explain why what Trump has said is appalling without having a taste of it. And particularly Trump doesn't really work as a transcript.
No.
Right? You need to hear him say it.
And the second best thing to hearing him say it is hearing you say it in the voice of Donald Trump.
Beautiful impressions. I said to them, wow, I said $50 million for condoms to Hamas. How could that? And they use them as bombs. He said that. No, I didn't make that up. That was verbatim, right? He actually said that. Quote. He said that. And also, and we're recording this on in the wake of the appalling aircraft tragedy in Washington, where a plane hit a Black Hawk helicopter, and it looks like 64 people are very sadly dead. And he can't help himself. He immediately posted on Truth Social his personal analysis of why this aviation tragedy had taken place. Not good.
Yeah.
And that was it was a teachable moment, as they say, because I remembered, oh my God, bad things are going to happen, and he's going to say really dumb things about them.
What he said was, why didn't anybody tell the helicopter to go up or down or to the left or to the right?
Well, thank you for that, Donald. I mean,
we'll bear that in mind next time.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be a huge help to the mourning families.
Yeah, my wife has a description for me which she frequently uses to avoid swearing in front of the kids. She calls me a fidiot, which is a nice conjunction
I got it.
of. And Donald Trump is definitely a fidiot.
I'd forgotten that the waking up in the morning and finding he said something incredibly not just stupid but actually consequential.
Yeah.
Because he then had, obviously someone said, sir, that's really not a good thing. So he came back and said, God bless you all, terrible night. What a president should do.
Terrible.
More to come, I'm afraid. Sorry, Ollie.
Ollie, hope we haven't triggered
this is another Trump, David Tarbox. Thanks, David.
Well, I should declare an interest. David Tarbox is a good friend of mine who I used to work with at the Daily Mirror, and is a brilliant videographer, amongst other things. But good question. Yeah. Thank you, David. Should Trump's potential land grabs of Panama and Greenland be seen as a worrying signal to which Putin, Xi, and Israel would respond in kind? Ukraine, Taiwan, and a greater Israel. For want of a better expression, it's a carve-up. And how does the UK respond? Should it bid for Greenland? What do you reckon, Matt? I think Greenland's got enough problems without being roped into the British.
Without Rachel Reeves being sent there with the checkbook.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is, isn't it? But there's a very serious point here. How can Donald Trump be wandering around saying, I'm going to have military action in Greenland, I'm going to take back the Panama Canal by force, and then object to China saying, well, we're going to have Taiwan?
I mean, there are the Greenland thing, which I think, by the way, is serious. I mean, he hasn't ruled out military force, which leads on to suppose it's a threat, he won't do it, but you never know with him. There are two sort of obvious huge problems with that. One is that if he did use military force, it would be, for the first time ever, two NATO powers.
Well, it's the end of NATO.
It is the end of NATO.
NATO would have to implode in its own logic.
It would, and which in itself is, I wouldn't say unthinkable, because nothing is unthinkable with Trump, but it really would. You're right. It would mark the end of NATO. And the other thing, to your point, Matt, is that it obviously, I mean, look, I don't think China should own Taiwan at all, but to be fair, it has a much greater claim to Taiwan than Trump does to Greenland. Yeah. And so, already, and it's interesting, I was reading in the Politico China newsletter this morning that already people in Beijing are thinking, is this his way of saying, if we go into Taiwan, we won't respond? And actually, it's a perfectly rational way to interpret what he's saying, which is, I'm going to extend Greater America. He sort of jokingly says he wants to make Canada the 51st state. He not jokingly says he wants Panama, and not jokingly says he wants Greenland.
Not all of Panama, just the Panama Canal.
Well,
maybe.
Who knows?
As a first step.
But that's the. But economically, that's the big bit.
Yeah.
Why on that basis should China take any notice of the West on Hong Kong and Taiwan?
Yeah.
Not to mention the Uyghurs,
It's just, the whole thing is colonialism, isn't it? It's despite this sense of him wanting to withdraw and America first and all of that, he's expressed these extraordinary colonial ambitions.
I think he squares the circle, because I think you're right, but we're seeing what America first means. I think there was a misunderstanding amongst a lot of people that because he was America first and peace through strength, that he was a peacenik.
Yeah.
He's not. And I think that he has a demented belief in manifest destiny, Greater America. His point is, why should we be fighting, giving money to the Ukraine, and why should we have fought these wars in Afghanistan and Iraq? They're miles away. Who cares, right? But on our doorstep, there's all this prime real estate and strategically important thing. And this is a very primitive ancestral definition of what America is. Yeah. And what it really amounts to your NATO point, is dismantling the liberal rules-based order and a completely new definition of what America is. And America is still the richest country in the world by far, and also it has, by even further, the most powerful military in the history of the planet.
Yeah.
So these are not small things.
No. And another thing that's not small is his personal sense of vanity. And I've got no doubt that Donald Trump, I'll bet you your life Donald Trump has nodded off to sleep on several occasions thinking of a fifth face on Mount Rushmore.
So much.
And this kind of thing, Trumpland, the new Greenland, expansion of the pioneering East now,
It's all horrible, but it's moving so fast. It is amounting to a sort of second American Revolution. It's like, the world, I think, presently divides not between left and right, but those who understand how big what Trump is doing is, and those who don't.
Right.
That's the, and it's not good.
Yeah.
But that's the divide.
David Tarbox, thank you, my
Great
friend.
question, David.
Great question. Caroline Osborne writes, "Nice pod, guys. Just nice. I don't know how to say.
Beautiful pod.
Do we move on? Beautiful, brilliant pod, best pod in the world.
Maybe the greatest, some people are saying.
Many people say, but not Caroline. Nice pod, guys. But how come, and this is a fair challenge, nice pod, guys, how come you didn't challenge Peter Hyman on his praise of Keir Starmer's AI speech, which you both thought was awful?
It is a fair challenge, but I think there's an answer to it, which I'm going to try, right?
Go on.
And it's to do with the difference between podcasts and old-fashioned mainstream media interviews.
Right.
This is not the Today programme. It's not But You Said. And so when Peter said that, I immediately thought we thought it was crap.
Yeah.
We could have said we thought it was crap, but he was on a roll. And you make a decision in a long-form podcast about how to use your time. And we could have gone down a cul-de-sac about AI, but I'm not sure how far it would have got us. Now, Caroline's absolutely right. There was a very strong case for us saying, blah, 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 that was rubbish. But I think, I don't know what you...
Yeah.
But I consciously thought, no, I'm not going to, because I want to get onto other stuff.
And I agree completely, and I think it's a very subtle thing, but there is a definite conviviality in a podcast.
Yes.
That we were having a really good conversation. I think
Yes.
Peter was absolutely brilliant. And I didn't want to. I don't think I
was
was
on a
wanted
roll
to
as
say,
well.
"No, mate, that's bullshit." Because it was. We were having a good, friendly, constructive conversation. I think where we would have drawn the line is if Peter had said something about, "Well, I think you're wrong about Britain trying to rejoin the European Union."
Yeah, well,
I think let's have a substantive argument. But yes, Caroline, yeah, you're absolutely right. Both Matt and I kind of gave each other a sideways glance when Peter said that, because we both thought, are we going to dive in here and say, no, that was shit? But we chose not to, and I think the overall benefit was there.
Just final thought, which is that I think that this is why mainstream media and podcasts have to exist side by side.
Yes.
Because I don't think for a minute that Emma Barnett and Amal Rajan and Nick Robinson and Justin Webb should not, do that aggressive, but you said, what about, quite punishing, quite punitive, quite adversarial style that we have on the Today programme and other programmes. But I think podcasts are different. They have a different role in the media ecosphere. The problem, though, is that we need both.
Yeah. I'll give you another example of, this is totally at the far end of the spectrum of what Caroline's describing, but obviously Alistair Campbell is our editor-at-large. And
Editor-at-larger, actually.
Editor-at-larger.
That was the agreement.
Two editors-at-large. One is Matt Dancona, who I'm facing. The other is the editor-at-larger is Alistair Campbell. And I know Alistair keeps going on about trying to get Nigel Farage onto the rest of his politics. And I've emailed him and said, and we've had a little debate about it. I've said, don't do it, because the nature of a podcast is that you will inevitably end up laughing and agreeing with him about something, and you'll be forever tarnished with him.
Whereas on Question Time...
much better to be on Question Time and nail the bastard.
Yeah, that's what Question Time is for.
Yeah.
The rest is politics, and other podcasts are not... You're right. Farage in the podcast is dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is not to say that, it's tempting. This is the problem, is it's tempting because, but I agree. The horrible worries, we'd end up making friends with him.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be good.
No, absolutely right. All right. Last question, I think.
Yeah. Well...
Oh, my Lord.
It really is the important one, isn't it? It's the biggie.
We saved the best till last.
I see in The Guardian that public intellectual Adrian Chiles has lost faith in zips. Do the Mats feel this is a serious blow to faith in general? From Donnie Nexter. Well, Matt, what do you reckon?
God. Well, so this is Adrian Chiles has got a column, and we should say for transparency, not that I think there's any transparency coming from The Guardian, but we should say for our listeners' transparency.
Just because it's true.
Adrian Chiles is married to the editor-in-chief of The Guardian.
Are they married? I thought they were partners.
No, they're married, yeah.
Oh, right.
And Adrian has this odd column.
Sort of fancy that kind of column.
Well, it's sort of like, it's a bit like a parody of a column, isn't it?
Well, what it does is it sort of takes it takes questions of very, very trivial character and nature and delivers an opinion on them as you would if asked with a NATO.
Yeah.
Or what's the future of the welfare state, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a quote to people who haven't had the joy and awakening of reading Adrian's column. He goes, "What is it with zips? Ask someone who knows about these things how to fix the zip on your coat, and they'll pull a little lemon of a face. Gravely, a head will be shaken. Very difficult, if not impossible. But why, you demand? It just is you're told, right?" Now, this obviously, and to answer your question, Donnie, is the clothing equivalent of Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach, isn't it? It's like the melancholy, long withdrawing roar of faith. And I think we're all a bit sad about it. But I don't know how you're feeling.
It has got, I because I'm a pretentious arse, I've been reading The Wasteland recently.
Yes.
And there is that great scene where talking in the pub and he says, "Time, ladies, hurry up now, time," all this. And there's this conversation about, well, if you didn't want to have children, why did you get married? You better get your teeth fixed. And as I read Adrian Chiles' latest column on Zip, I did think this could be TS Elliot, this. And if it was TS Elliot, people would be saying, Mike, this is a work of absolute
That's
genius.
a world first. No one has ever said about an Adrian Chiles column, it could be T.S. Eliot.
But there's something so incredibly banal about it that it almost transcends its own banality.
Yes, no, you're right. I think that the only person who can really nail this one is Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
Because he has just published an almost unreadably long book, well, it is unreadably long, called We Who Wrestle with God. And I would like him to write an article called, and Jordan, if you're listening, and I know you are, and I don't want to speak for Mac because it's his call, but if you were interested in writing a piece called We Who Wrestle with Zips, we'd print it, wouldn't we?
Put it on the front page.
Yeah, so if you're listening, Jordan, and Michaela Peterson, if you can get that to your dad, if you're listening, anyone in the Peterson extended family, please get Jordan the message. He's needed at the New European.
Yeah.
We Who Wrestle with Zips.
That's right. I can't help but think we've descended into absolute Adrian Chiles style moronic.
No, I disagree. I dissent. I think that what we do is we cover the waterfront in this podcast, right? You can't miss the. 1 minute you're talking about Brexit, then you miss the zips, right?
Right. On this bombshell, it's time to move on.
On this load of nonsense.
If you want more nonsense like this, subscribe to the New European.
Yes.
Help us pay the bills
serious
for the 2 Mads
as well.
podcast.
It's not just about
it's not all
zips.
just zips.
Not more than zips.
In fact, none of it is about
None of
zips.
it. We've never done a zip piece to my knowledge.
Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2Mats. That's the number 2, MATTS. And there's a special gift when you sign up from a little more than £1 a week. Send in any questions for next week's Q&A to 2mats@tnepublishing.com. Thank you, as ever, to our Rethink audio production team led by Matt Hill. It's been our great pleasure to talk to you on this fine Sunday.
We'll see you tomorrow, Monday, and have a great day.
Have a wonderful day.